Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today, we really are going to be talking about how to make your business successful. And it's all about how you treat your employees, how you treat other people. And it's interesting. This seems to be a theme of what I'm talking about today, because I did another program not long ago about Bob Burg and Go Giver, and how all of those philosophies are so important in doing business. It's about how we treat the people we are working with, who we're serving, all those things, about building those relationships. And you know what? You do it well and you make money. That's the amazing thing about this. When you treat people well, whether it's your customers, whether it's your friends, your business associates, or your employees, you do it well, you're successful. And so joining me today is Sherry Deutschmann, who's going to be talking to us about this. So welcome, Sherry.
Thank you, Deb. It's just a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Great. And you're just a hop, skip, and a jump up the road for me in Nashville.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, let me tell people just a little bit more about you, and then we will jump into this. So how does a single mom with only a high school diploma build a $40 million company from the ground up? Sherry Deutschmann claims it was her innate empathy that drove her to start her company, with her belief that if she took great care of her employees, they'd take great care of the customers, and the customers would be loyal and willing to pay a premium for the extraordinary service. Her unusual employee-first culture worked and got national press, and has been written about in the New York Times, Forbes, Inc., and Business Leader magazine, and the company was named an Inc. 5000 company, an honor bestowed on the fastest growing private companies in the U.S. for, get this, 10 consecutive years. So again, Sherry, welcome.
Thank you. Just a joy to be with you.
We are going to have so much fun, but let's go back in the Wayback Machine and tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are now and how you discovered that this really is a passion of your life.
Well, I guess we are going to the way back because, as you noted, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, home of country music.
Right.
And actually home of music. Mm-hmm. So I moved to Nashville to be a star. I thought that I was a singer until I got here.
Uh-oh.
And then,
somebody convinced you otherwise.
Oh my God. My ears convinced me otherwise. I heard real talent here. The world famous Bluebird Cafe had just opened, and I went there every night that I could, and I listened to incredible songwriters and singers, and decided that I didn't have the goods. But I didn't have an education. I didn't have any skills. I was a single mom, had no money. I say you had no skills. Actually, I was the best toilet scrubber. I had a route, my sister and I had a route where we cleaned gas station bathrooms.
Oh, okay.
And then there were a lot of wealthy people in my hometown, snowbirds, people who had their summer homes or their winter homes in my little ski resort town. And I cleaned their houses for them. And those were my only skills. Education, just a high school diploma, no money. And yet I decided, and no experience singing, and decided that I was going to move to Nashville to be a star.
That takes, what is it, chutzpah?
I was nuts, actually, just totally delusional. But I'm really grateful for that delusion, because it got me to Nashville.
Right.
And I had no support system here. As a mom, I was newly divorced and had a young child. She was 2 or 3 years old. had no one to turn to. I had to rely on myself. And the first couple of years in Nashville were so hard that often I didn't have electricity because I could afford daycare or the light bill, but not both. And I think, it's a very common story for single moms or for parents and even couples. It's just really hard to make ends meet.
Right.
And I worked a series of different sales jobs. My first job in Nashville was selling cars because the only asset that I had was a car that I paid $1 for. And
wow.
People said I got ripped off. And she was the ugliest car you've ever seen, and she had a really good stereo system inside, but somebody had broken in and stolen my stereo. So it just had big holes on the inside where all those things were, and on the outside it had rolled off a mountain, so it was all misshapen and rusty.
It had character.
Yeah, I don't even know about that. It was so lopsided that from a mile away, you could see the silhouette of my car coming and you knew it was me. But I went to my first job in Nashville was at a car dealership because I had heard that you didn't have to have experience to sell cars and that they gave you a free car to drive, a brand new one. So my common sense taught me that was a pretty good move for me. I went there and applied for a job, and it's pretty funny. The general manager said, "Your timing is really good because I've been thinking we should have some women sell cars. But tell me, young lady, what do you know about cars?" Like, yeah, not much. And he said, "Well, what do you drive?" And I pointed out the window to my beat up old Volkswagen, and he shook his head. And he said, "Young lady, this business is full of rejection and it's really difficult. Can you handle rejection?" I said, "Yes, sir, I can." And he said, "How do I know that?" And I said, "Because I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on doors."
You were those people that we avoided.
Yes. I was the one that you told always that you were Catholic, thinking.
Yes, I know. That's the typical response.
So he hired me because he knew I could handle rejection, and that turned to be selling cars was a good training ground. But I ended up in a series of other sales jobs, and I did really well at sales. It's interesting that background, being a JW, is really good for sales.
Right. It teaches you how to approach people in a friendly way.
Yes. And, we called on the homes of the uber wealthy, and we called on homes that still had no indoor plumbing.
Right.
So
everybody was the same.
Exactly. So it was really good, and I did well in sales. But in the early days when I couldn't afford electricity sometimes, I also didn't have healthcare insurance.
Right. And
there was a time when my daughter, I think she was about 5 at the time, cut her foot on the playground. And so I doctored it as best I could until I realized I just had to take her to the emergency room. About 4 days in, it was looking really bad, maybe. So I didn't have health insurance. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have any money. I didn't have anybody in town as a resource to borrow money from to go to the doctor. So I just took her to the emergency room. And the doctor told me that if I'd waited even a day longer, she might have lost her leg. Or her life. She had a bad infection. And so those hard times when I first got to this town kind of informed the kind of leader I will to become later. And I have innate empathy in spades, but it made it even greater. And when I say in spades, I'm one of those people that I go to watch my football team, the Titans, play. And when we win, like we won recently last night, I'm thrilled until I look at the people who lost.
I know. I always think, oh.
Yeah, and I'll start crying for them. So that's messed up. But I have this innate empathy that was, I think, really cultured by the hard times that I had when I
Mhm.
when I first came to Nashville.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I ended up doing really well, making a lot of money. And I went from that beat up old Volkswagen
Mhm.
to a Jaguar,
Ooh.
and went from having so little money I couldn't keep the lights on
Mhm.
to having a couple of houses. In fact, I was flipping houses as a hobby.
Mm.
And so I was working for a company printing and mailing hospital bills. Not a very sexy business.
No, but it's something that needs done, kind of like cleaning the toilets.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was good at it. And so I was making good money.
Mhm.
But we ran into a problem where I would sell a new account.
Mhm.
We would lose an account the same day because our
Oh.
service was so bad.
Mhm.
And this went on for months until I became a professional apologist.
Mm.
I mean, all I did all day long
Mhm.
was field calls from angry customers.
Oof.
It was brutal.
Mhm.
And groveling with them, really,
Mhm.
to get them to keep their business with
Mhm.
us, and telling them that we were learning from our mistakes.
Mhm.
They weren't.
Mhm.
And all of our problems, it was really simple human error. That's all.
Mhm.
And I couldn't figure out why we kept screwing up these little things.
Mhm.
Had big consequences. So I just studied it.
Mhm.
And I realized that it was carelessness.
Mhm.
The carelessness was because my coworkers didn't care.
Right.
They didn't care
Mhm.
because nobody cared about them.
Mhm. They
And
were just somebody there to do the work.
yes.
Mhm.
And I knew that because I was responsible for 100% of the revenue coming into that company.
Mhm.
I was mistreated.
Mhm.
I thought, how much more are they mistreated when they're down there running machines?
Right. A nobody is.
Yes. So I had that epiphany.
Mhm.
And it was right, now I would say I ran in to talk to my boss about employee engagement. But
Mhm.
I didn't know that term then.
Right.
I just knew that
You were
morale was
telling them
really
be nice.
yes.
Mhm.
I just thought, well, if we worked on getting to know them better and other things, that it would improve morale.
Mhm.
And Deb, you would think that he would say, thank you
Right.
for
But he
helping
said
me
no.
figure out how to improve my company.
Mhm.
And he didn't.
Mhm.
He patted my hand
Mhm.
and said, Sherry, you don't know anything about business.
Mhm.
Why don't you just go sell something?
Mhm.
So I was really angry
Mhm.
and hurt, but had to reflect on what he said, that I didn't know much about business.
Mhm.
But still, I knew that I had something he didn't have.
Mhm.
Maybe a couple of things, common sense and empathy. And so I went and sold another account.
Mm.
It wasn't for him. It was for me.
Ooh. Mhm.
I walked out the door that day,
Mhm.
never went back in.
Oh, good.
Went straight down to the bookstore and bought myself an armload of books about how to write a business plan.
Mm.
Because I'd never even read one.
Right. Uh-huh.
And wrote a business plan. And then I took it to several people in town to loan me $350,000. I thought I needed to get this business started, competing with that guy.
Mhm.
And hard to believe, but all of them said yes.
Mhm.
Everybody I approached said, yes, I'll give you the money. But none of them liked my ideas for how to run that business. And so I said no to all of them.
Mm.
I cashed in my 401k.
Mhm.
I had a week-long yard sale and sold everything I owned
Mhm.
to get the money.
Mhm.
It wasn't $350,000, by the way. It was just barely enough to get by. And I went down to Goodwill and bought myself a couple of old short filing cabinets
Mhm.
and got one of those old doors and pulled it over.
Oh, you made a desk? Mhm.
And I got a whiteboard and a computer and a telephone, and I started just dialing for dollars.
Mhm.
And I vowed that I was never going to be like him, not listening and not caring what his employees thought.
Mhm.
And at that same time, I read the book called Nuts, and it's about how Herb Kelleher started Southwest Airlines with his belief that if the flight attendants and the pilots were happy, then the passengers would be happy.
Right.
And well, look how that worked out for him. Southwest Airlines, one of the greatest successes in the airline industry. And that really turned me on. So I decided I was going to start out putting the employees first, an employee-centric culture. And that my model would be, I was going to take such good care of them that when they were at work, they wouldn't have to be worried about whether or not their lights would be on, whether or not they had health insurance, or whether they could, afford to pay the daycare bill. I was going to take care of all that. And so from the day we opened the door there, we made sure that we were paying a fair living wage. And I could talk to you an hour about what that means.
Right. Yeah. It's not that little minimum amount that people list.
It's not. It's not near that. So we made sure first that we were paying that. Then we paid for 100% of our employees' medical, dental, disability, and life insurance.
Wow.
We let them bring their kids and their pets to work anytime they wanted to or needed to, which was awesome because, I think your listeners are all around the world, so and I don't know exactly what the various cultures do, but in the U.S., if your child has a runny nose,
too bad, so sad.
Yeah, they can't go to daycare that day.
Right. And they can't stay home by themselves, so what do you do?
And if you stay home, you don't get paid that day.
Right.
And the company doesn't get the benefit of your work. The child isn't sick. It could be allergies.
Right.
But so I just said, bring them to work. And at those rare snow days that we would have in Nashville, Tennessee, everybody brought their kids. And it was a zoo and a blast. It was fun. But we also had a really unique profit sharing plan that changed everything. And I want to talk to you about that later. But we also helped employees that wanted to start their own companies. We helped them start their own business and invest in their own business. And really importantly, when it comes to morale and engagement, we help every employee buy their first home.
I love it.
Gift for the down payment or closing costs on their house. And all those things did exactly what I thought they would do. It made the employees happy, attentive, absolutely fully engaged. And our reputation for stellar service grew on its own. And all the years we did very little marketing, no advertising. It was just word of mouth. And it was my job back then to sit in front of potential clients. And our clients were big healthcare systems nationwide. And so, the largest healthcare systems. And I would sit across from these decision makers at their big boardroom tables and tell them, I want your business. Really do. But you have to know that I don't believe the customer comes first. My employees come first. But let me tell you how that's going to affect you. And then I would start telling them about how we took care of the employees. And Deb, within a few seconds, really, they were nodding.
Right. And thinking, why can't we do that here?
Exactly. And often they would say, where do we sign? Or can I come to work for you? But they chose us. In fact, our sales team said that 85% of our sales were what they called a culture sale. That people chose us because of the culture, even though we were the most expensive in the nation.
Right. But they knew it was worth it.
They knew it was worth it. And so the culture just kind of took on a life of its own. So the employees, the empathy that I displayed toward them became contagious, and it made them care more about each other.
Right.
And work together very tightly. So we were able to get to 40 million in revenue with only 50 employees.
Wow.
Because they worked harder. And a lot of that was my profit share plan, which you have to hear about. But we got a lot of press. We got a lot of people wrote about us. And then I was invited to address Congress on minimum wage And then from that, the U.S. Secretary of Labor came and spent a day with our company.
Wow.
And that brought us to the attention of President Barack Obama, who named me a White House Champion of Change in 2016.
Wow.
And this is simply because of treating employees fairly.
Right.
So most of the time, people just talk about our benefits. But what they didn't know about, the three things behind the scenes that were really at the core of who we were and our success. And so I hope you'll let me talk about those three things.
Yes. Oh, yes. And before we start on that, I think the problem that many people have, and whether it's that they have employees, they might, with whoever they're working, maybe they're, the head of a volunteer organization, all these, they treat the people that they're working with as disposable.
Yeah.
We can replace them. And to some degree they can. I mean, unfortunately right now, there are a lot of people who are out of work. And so we'll take many things that, normally they wouldn't. But they think, well, why do we have to treat people nice, fairly, all those various things, because we can replace them pretty easy. And of course they to some degree they can, like we said, there's plenty of people who are going to apply for the jobs. But the problem is, and we all know that when you have to replace somebody, even if it's a basic level type of employee, you still have to train them. I mean, there's costs that go into having to replace an employee. But more importantly, it does come back to that morale. And even more importantly is loyalty. When you have employees who have been with an organization for many, many years, that is so different than the companies that you talk to that say, yeah, our average employee is here less than a year. Yeah. I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to work anywhere like that, because it's just going to have many problems. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you talk to, say, fast food places where they have employees who've been with them for years and years and years. So it's not, people can't say, well, the nature of our business is that, no, if you treat your employees well, then they're going to stay with you, and they'll support you when there might be problems. I think we're seeing that right now with the pandemic, that employees are saying, okay, what do we need to do to keep this business afloat? We'll take less hours, all these various things, because they want to keep those companies going. And unfortunately we see the opposite, where people are, they're like, I can make more on unemployment. So sorry, I'm done. And so that's where it's interesting. But, so now let's talk about the three things that you do to really get your employees to know that you value them more than anything.
Well, Gallup does studies every couple of years on employee engagement, and their latest one says that 64% of our employees are disengaged.
Right.
These are just clocking in.
I'm surprised it's 64. I would have thought it was higher.
It was higher. This past year came down for whatever reason. And that 30% are actively disengaged, meaning they are stirring the pot, making everybody else just as unhappy as they are.
Oh, yeah.
So, and a lot of it is because they don't feel they
feel disposable.
Exactly right. You nailed it. And so the first thing that I did to make sure that my employees knew they were not disposable was just listening to them, spending time talking with them, listening to them. And the best way I did that was something we called Lunch with Lucy.
Right. I love it. And you've written a book about that. So, folks, we want you to know that what we're talking about here is part of a book.
So on Wednesdays, I wasn't Sherry, the CEO. On Wednesdays, I just became Lucy, a coworker. And anybody could sign up to have lunch with me. And they chose the restaurant. They chose who else would be at the table with us. So sometimes it was just the two of us. And sometimes it was a spouse. Sometimes it was their whole department. If they wanted to gang up on me about a policy or something.
Or a suggestion.
And I just listened to them. And it was in those lunches that I got to hear about their unique circumstances at home. sometimes that were pretty atrocious.
Right.
Stuff they were facing at home before they came to work, and that fogged their judgment and their day before they even got the door. And I got to hear about their hopes and dreams. And none of them had hoped and dreamed about working for a printing company.
Right. I mean, that's not the thing that, when you're 6 years old and somebody says, so Sherry, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to print hospital bills. No, none of them thought that. So I got to hear what they wanted to do, and I listened to them. And when they told me about things that I was doing wrong in leadership, because I asked them, what am I doing wrong? What should I stop doing?
Right.
What should I start doing? I listened. And they knew I listened because they saw the changes that I made subsequent. And it's funny now, I sold the company 4 years ago, but daily I get emails or calls to Lucy saying, hey, Lucy come out for lunch, or can Lucy meet me for a glass of wine?
Oh, I love it.
To the employees, I'm still Lucy. Listening was really critical. Two is around transparency. All business owners want their companies to be as profitable as possible and to get all the employees deeply engaged. But most employees do not understand how the companies make money.
Right.
And they don't understand their part in the company making money. And so I knew that from my own experience. And so I had an open door and open book policy. And every month I brought together all the employees in one room and we went over the financials from the previous.
Wow. Every month.
Every month. Because we had to wait till the books closed. So usually about the 16th of the month where we had this meeting, we had lunch catered in. So we were all talking and eating together and looking at the financials. They could remember what had happened in the last 45 days. And for the first time, Deb, they could start connecting the dots between their behavior or something that we as a company had screwed up, connecting that to the results on the bottom line.
Right.
And we talked about it. So to the penny, they knew how much money we brought in that month. To the penny, they knew how much profit we made. And then we just talked about why the results were the way they were. And that was so enlightening. And for most employees, that was enough. Some employees wanted more.
Right.
And so mostly the salespeople. I would say, come to my office. Take a chair. Right here next to me. Let's get into our accounting system. And we were using NetSuite, and say, what do you want to see? And they would get to see to the fraction of a penny our cost of goods. And that helped them make better decisions about what kind of account to go after and what their pricing should be. And because of that, I didn't sign contracts and I didn't set the pricing. They did.
Wow.
Because they were perfectly well informed about what it needed to be to drive the results to the bottom line. Another way we were transparent is we published the minutes to our leadership meetings every week. So I would notice we had kind of a fishbowl meeting room, so everybody in the company would walk by and see us in this meeting. And some occasionally people would say, "What were y'all talking about today?"
You looked very serious.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so I just started publishing the minutes, unless we were talking about an individual performance.
Right. Yeah, there were some legal things that,
But they could see what we were talking about. So if they had complained to me over lunch about a piece of equipment that was the bottleneck, they knew I heard because it was there in the minutes. I was talking to the other leaders in the company about what do we do about this. And so that gave them extraordinary confidence, one in their ability to approach the leadership team, and that we were listening, that we heard them. And then the third thing came as a result of that, not as a result, but you might ask, like, why should they care about your bottom line?
Right.
It was my company. Because at that same meeting, we took 10% of the bottom line and handed out checks and distributed that money evenly.
Wow.
Which is an unheard of profit share plan. So it
right,
meant,
because normally it's the people at the top get a bigger bonus.
right, because it's based on a percentage of your salary.
Right.
So that didn't sit well with me. I felt like our custodian was just as important as our CEO.
Sometimes more so.
Exactly right. When that toilet's clogged.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to incentivize and reward everybody equally. And so the first profit share checks were $7.
But everybody got $7.
And they were jubilant. And then it grew to 70, and then 300, and 500, and 700. And think about that.
Nice.
Making $20 an hour, and every month at this meeting, you get a check for $300 or $500 or $7,000.
Right.
Don't tell me that won't drive engagement, because I saw it.
Right.
And I saw the behavior of the employees change because they were absolutely fully vested.
Right.
And it's weird that in the months where the profit wasn't as good, because we'd made some mistakes, the celebration for that check was just as big.
Right.
You know, whether the check was 200 or 700, it was still like, we did this. Look, I did this with you. And it was the single best business idea I ever had. And I've incorporated it into a new company I started. And now lots of business owners around have started doing the same. And I've had 3 that have reached out to me in the last month. Wow. They said they started doing it in the last 6 months, and they've had the 2 most profitable quarters back to back this year.
In a pandemic.
History. In a pandemic. And one of those businesses was 20 years old, and one was 10, and the other was more than 20 years old. And so to have the most profitable months, because of the profit share, because of the way it engages the employees and makes them care more for one another.
Right. Well, and, say they're down for that month, then they know, it can be done to get a bigger check. What do we need to do?
Exactly. One of the great stories to illustrate how it worked was I had an employee who came to me. He was a department leader and said, I need 2 more employees because the volume is getting so high. We were doing over 400,000 bills a day. And so he said, it's getting so high that I can't meet the 7 p.m. deadline. At 7 p.m., all of our work had to be completed because the post office would then pull away a big tractor trailer. And so he said, I need 2 more people. So we talked about who they would report to and what shift and what they would be doing. And I agreed, do what you need to do. And as I was walking out of my office, I said, hey, just a minute. Have you looked at how that's going to affect the profit share this month?
Right. Because all of a sudden now there's salary that, Well,
there's 2 more people to split the profits. Besides,
the $1,000 is now getting split 5 ways as opposed to 3 ways, whatever.
And he was like, whoa, can I talk to you about this tomorrow? And I said, sure. The next morning he came in and said, hey, we reworked the whole thing. We only need 1 person. And they were fine. They got along great with just 1 because it made them think a little differently about what they really had to have.
Right. Yeah. 2 sounded nice. Sounds nice, But yeah, when I was like, oh, now wait a minute, let's really think about this. They went, okay.
Yeah, it had a profound effect, and because it was equal, it made employees help new employees get up to speed quicker.
Right.
Because they wanted them to be pulling their weight. And when somebody had to be out or there was a sickness, it made everybody just pitch in and try to make it all work because they had a vested interest in it working. It was an incredible incentive for the employee.
Right.
And nothing against the typical profit share plan, but the way they usually work is that they're done on an annual basis. And So it becomes more like an entitlement and
Right.
less of,
And in whatever month, hey, you get X.
and a lot of people stay until X.
Yes. Oh yeah, we got to stay until January 31st or whatever. And
Well, we didn't have that because it was an every month thing. And so we had people engaged in wanting that next month. And the fact that it was equal was just critical to having everybody work together, and fully appreciating one another.
Yeah. I've worked in companies before where, those of us at lower levels, when you saw how the senior management, maybe they were driving the Jaguars, they had the big corner offices, you knew that they had the big house. And I mean, one of the things that you're thinking is, but what are they doing to earn that? I mean, we're doing all the work, right? That's what a lot of people think. But then when you know that they also get the huge bonuses. Now, it is different, it's not that they're not doing the work, and managing however many people. I mean, it's very complicated. But, I remember one of the jobs that I had a private printer. In other words, it wasn't networked. So the whole world didn't go up and see the printer. So, and I was in the communications department, which was communications / HR. It was a very weird combination. But so when it came bonus time, they printed the bonus letters on my printer because then nobody else would see them. Well, I saw them. And I remember looking at some of the bonuses that people got and really thinking, what on earth did they do to deserve that amount of money? And we knew that a lot of it was funny because the same exact company also realized that one of the most important places in that building was the mail room, because that's where the checks came into that got opened to get deposited to keep the company going. I mean, it was really one of those anomalies. But yeah, I mean, I remember looking at those checks thinking, I'm sorry, dude does not deserve that much. And especially when I knew that there were people who seemed to work far more, far harder, all those various things. And their bonus was $1,000 or whatever.
Yeah. Our system is really screwed up. I mean, it just, the rich keep getting richer, poor keep getting poorer, and the chasm's getting greater all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, we're especially seeing that, I think, now with the pandemic. But I think the other thing that we're seeing with the pandemic are the people who are just completely and totally blindsided when their company can't survive it. And that's because none of the information has been being shared. They didn't know that their type of business ran on really tight margins. I mean, I've talked to people who said, well, I worked in X restaurant for, several years and they shut down 2 months into the pandemic. How could they do that? They must have made lots of money. But no, they didn't understand that there's, it's not just that they got a X number of dollars coming in. There's also X number of dollars going out, and all of those things. And so they were just totally blindsided when their business is closed.
And that's where the transparency becomes so valuable. I've had a few people say, well, I can't do that. The employees would freak out if they knew how much money we're making.
Right.
And that's not true. They think you're making more than you are.
Yeah, they're always going to think it's higher.
Yeah, they think that you're killing it, and you're not. You barely got your head above water. They don't know about you. They don't think about your rent, about the insurance costs that you have. They don't know about basic overhead. Nothing bad.
Yeah, they don't know that it's thousands of dollars a month just to keep the lights on. Literally.
They think about the expense of them is salary. They don't know about all the expense and the unemployment insurance and all those all those other things that not unemployment insurance. What am I thinking of? The
workers' comp. Yeah.
They don't understand about all those hidden costs.
Right.
To the owners. I felt like sharing the books with the employees made them have empathy for me.
Right. To understand what you were having to deal with every month.
Yes. And I went without a raise for 7 years because I wanted to make sure that all of them really had their standard of living where it needed to be for them to live right and have all the benefits and everything covered. And so when I gave myself a raise, I announced it to them at a company meeting that I'm giving myself a raise 7 years and this is what I'm paying myself. And there was no resentment.
Well, and I'm guessing there were probably quite a few who said you should have done it years ago.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. Even, even my board thinking you should pay yourself better.
Yeah. And uh, as you were saying, when we all have empathy for each other, that's where we really see things. I remember years ago when I was working for a company, we had a woman who her husband had terminal cancer. And unfortunately, it was one of these that drug on for quite a long time. And, she ran out of sick leave in a very quick period of time. And the company allowed other people to donate their sick time. So if I had 5 days that, whether I was going to, maybe I was, going to use it or not, I could allow it to go to her. And I remember everybody thinking just how wonderful that was, that we were supporting her in that way. And then unfortunately we changed senior management and they went, well, you can't do that. Look at all the paperwork. Well, I'm sorry. It was not that complicated. And some of it really was the honor system, some things like that. But the second that the employee thinks that their employer or their manager or their whoever it is doesn't care about them, then why are they going to care? I mean, and it's just as simple as that.
It absolutely is. And you were talking about the impactful and contagious nature of empathy. One of the best ways I saw that displayed in my book, I tell lots of stories about how they care for one another, and you'll cry. You can't get through it without crying.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But the most incredible one was a young woman, 26 years old, who had worked for me for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. When I sold the company, I announced on a Monday that the company had been sold, and the following Monday was my last day with employees. Wow. And last week, I met with each person individually to thank them for their contribution, and then I gave them a check, a big bonus gift based on how long they've been with me. So she had only been with me a couple of years. So I think her check was like $35,000.
Holy schmoly.
They were quite large, but I gave 50% to sell to the employees. And so a couple of months later, she called Lucy to say, hey, Lucy, can you go to lunch with me? I want to tell you what I did with my money. So a 26-year-old woman, what do you think she would do with that money? A new car?
I bet you bought a house. Oh, no, you said you did that already for people.
She paid off her parents' mortgage.
Oh.
Yeah. Her parents were Serbian refugees, and he had overheard them talking about how they wish they could help more family back in Serbia, and they couldn't until the mortgage was paid off. And so she had saved up all of her profit share checks in those 2 years. And then with this $35,000, had to go pay it off. And she said it was the empathy that was contagious in the company. And she said, before I worked here, I would have thought about doing that.
No, she would have thought, oh, I can go buy a car.
But instead, isn't that amazing? That she was so generous. But I think it was because of the generosity that her coworkers shared with her.
Right. And some people, they don't share their personal stories. I mean, that's just the way they are. But we can still kind of get a feeling, to know this person's not having a good day. We don't have to know why they're not having a good day to still think, I'm going to get them a cup of coffee or see if they need lunch or, some things like that. And to know that we can do that and not have a penalty, because that's the other thing. You're thinking, well, if I do that, there's going to be a problem. No, when every employee is empowered to do that, that's the important thing.
Absolutely.
And I love that you talk about the fact that you did things like help people with their first home purchase, but education benefits are one of those things that I think to whatever degree they can, companies should do. And maybe it's that they take night school, whatever it is. And it really annoys me when somebody says, well, but if Sherry gets that degree, she's going to leave us. She might.
If she
But
does,
she might also be the best employee that you've ever had. Now, I mean, obviously, like I've worked for companies where it had to be company related. So like I couldn't have gone off and gotten a veterinary degree or something, so it had to, hopefully benefit the company. But in many cases, people took that shiny degree, that whatever it was, and they did leave. But they also left with good feelings. I mean, and things like that. So I always think that providing some type of educational program for employees, it's always a good thing.
I agree. And what's worse, them getting educated, getting smarter, getting more capable and leaving, or them staying with you without the education, without the extra capability? You're much better off setting them up to move on to their next best thing.
Yeah.
And so we did reimburse any educational expenses, and at 100%, because we wanted the employees to continue to grow and learn, and not to be stuck with us forever. We wanted to set them up.
Yeah, I mean, they like you said, you were printing hospital bills.
Yeah.
Some of them might have thought that that there was something else that they wanted to do.
Oh, I mean, many times I had conversations with the employees where I would say, what you're doing right now is not what you were meant to be doing. It's just a stepping stone. And I want you to think about moving on. Come on, let me help you fly to your next position. And it was, we celebrated and had big parties for employees that were leaving to something bigger and better.
Right.
To give them a good send-off with a lot of love and encouragement.
Right. And they remembered that, because depending on what they went into, there might have been ways that they could continue to benefit your company, all sorts of things. And even if it was just to say nice things, that's the thing. And you talked about the fact that, if you've got an unhappy employee, it's not just that they don't do their work. It's that, many times they're in there and maybe they're not even saying things, but if they're not happy with their work, they're probably going to be late. They're going to take longer breaks. They're going to leave early. I mean, there's just so many things that are in there. And, and that's where companies lose so much. If you've got employees who are coming in late, leaving early, that work time is just gone. And then they're unhappy. So they're really not doing the best job that they can. So, fine, send them on their way, bid them a happy adieu.
I think that the figure that Forbes magazine and Gallup came up with on the cost of these disengaged employees, I think it was in the $60 billion a year in the U.S. price range.
Right.
It's an extraordinary expense to have people there that are not engaged.
Right. And even if they still have, say, a positive attitude, so they're not coming in late, they're not, nitpicking, my guess is they're still not doing 100%. They're doing just enough to get by. Yeah. And I've heard people say before that being average is what many people are. Well, we don't want people to be average. We want them to excel. And sometimes that does mean that they leave. But that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's a great thing. Sometimes because, I had to fire people occasionally.
Oh yeah. I mean, things happen.
And even then I felt like I was doing something good for them. I was freeing up their future.
Right. There was a reason you had to fire them.
Yeah. So even that I think can be done with empathy and is empathetic to the rest of the company.
Right.
I was firing a woman one day and she said, "If you fire me, you're not who you say you are." And I said, "How so?" And she said, "Well, you claim to be people first." And I said, "I am. I'm not person first." And the decisions that you have made have put the livelihoods of everybody else in a very precarious situation. So I'm putting the people first, and this person has to go.
Right. And she clearly was not happy. So, in the long run, it was probably much better for her.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I really want to talk about one of the things that you're doing now, and that's brain trust. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I started Brain Trust because there are about 13 million women business owners in the U.S., and less than 2% of them ever get to $1 million in revenue.
Wow.
And so, in the fact, they average is around $80,000 a year. And so I started Brain Trust as a peer-to-peer membership for women-owned businesses to get together once a month. They get together in small groups of a maximum of 7, and each of them bring a problem to the table that they're having in their business, and the other women ask questions, get to the bottom of, really at the core of the problem, and through experience sharing only, no advice, they help each other through those problems, and they hold each other accountable to goals. And I fashioned it after I am a member of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and WPO, the Women's Presidents Organization. But both those groups, you have to have $1 million in revenue, and you have to own at least 50% of your business. Well, what about the rest of us? So I'm trying to be a feeder for those organizations, getting more women to that point. Because at $1 million in revenue, you're paying yourself a decent salary. You're starting to build some personal wealth, and you're really starting to build your ability to be influential in the community.
Right. Yeah, you have money that you can give back, things like that.
And it's funny that being a successful entrepreneur gives you a megaphone. I mean, it did for me. How else was I, this single mom with no education, going to be recognized by the President of the United States? It was just through business. And so Brain Trust was started to help more women get there. And because of COVID, we had intended to be in several U.S. cities, but because of COVID, we're doing it virtually and growing like crazy. So,
yeah, it's like you said, it might be a benefit. You can have even more because we can be virtual.
That has been a result. And it's great to see the women, how quickly they have bonded together and working to support one another to that critical mark. So we've got several that'll hit the $1 million mark this year. We've got one that's probably at 20 million.
Wow.
We've got a couple that have just joined us that will have $1 billion businesses. These are really incredible entrepreneurs. So it's just great to be a part of this network that will make them be outrageously successful.
Right. And I think it is, I'm not going to say difficult. It is different to be a woman entrepreneur. And part of that was how many of us of, say, a certain generation were raised. It was, well, no, you're not supposed to be a business person. I still remember when people told me, well, why would you want to go to college? Aren't you just going to get married? No, I didn't get married till I was in my 30s. And now granted, when I went to school, you did more than become a teacher or a nurse. But I mean, that was because I'm at the very tail end of baby boomer. But, and I think women a lot of times think, well, we're going to be judged much more harshly, all these various things. And let's be honest, not only are we running our business, we're still the in many cases, and I'm overgeneralizing here, but the primary caregiver, for your kids, things like that. And so women have just totally different things that they need to discuss with other people who understand that.
Yeah. There's so many societal biases. I mean, I liked to pretend they weren't there because I didn't want to acknowledge them when I was starting my business, because I thought to acknowledge them would give them more oxygen and make them bigger.
Right.
But there were $80 billion invested in private equity, by private equity and venture capital in businesses in the U.S. last year. And less than 2% of that went to women. That's crazy, isn't it?
Right.
For 98% to go to men and 2% to go to women. So there are societal biases that we have to overcome, and together the women can do that. And then there are a lot of men who are great proponents of women in business. And I mean, my great mentors through the years most of them were men.
Right. And I think it's a matter of, I think a lot of times women think, oh, I can't do that. I can't, or maybe it's more, that we need to be very independent. One of the things I work with people who are out of work. And so I help them with LinkedIn profiles and things like that. And it always just amazes me when, there's a man and a woman who are applying for the same job. So it has the same, say, 10 qualifications. And a woman goes, oh, I can do 9 of those, but the 10th one, maybe not so much.
Because she doesn't even apply.
Well, yeah. And she doesn't apply. And the guy looks at that same 10 list and goes, okay, I can do 2 of those well, 3 of them kind of, and 5 I can outsource to somebody else. And they, and so there's just, and I don't know where that comes from. I do see that changing with the younger generations. And it's funny, people poke fun at millennials, and I love millennials. They really were brought up so differently. They were brought up to believe that they could, maybe is one of the easiest ways to put it. And that there weren't limitations. Now, obviously there are, but if I took a millennial and said, hey, what about these 10 things? I think they would be more likely to say, okay, 5 of these I do really well, 3 of these I do, and the other 2 I'm going to learn how to do. So it's not just, I'm not going to do it. Like, many people, it's, I can figure out how to do it.
Yes. Yeah. They've got that, I got this attitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like them too. Always like
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the book, Lunch with Lucy.
Well, the book came out in March, and it's been on the Amazon bestseller list several times, up and down, which is great. And as a business book, it is chock full of really good common sense ways to incentivize your employees, to get them engaged, and great stories about how the culture affected the employee, how they affected me.
Right.
And things about how to do it if you don't have the money to spend. So you can't help your employees buy a house. What are things that you can do to get them engaged that are free? A habit that I had was writing handwritten notes to the parents of my employees.
Oh.
Or the spouses. To say, I know you've made a contribution by the fact that your husband is gone. He's on the road 2 days a week. But I want you to know how that's affecting all the other people in their families. And thank you for making the sacrifice. And talk to them about specific things. Or to write to the parents of a young man and to say, I want you to know that you raised a man. He might be just 22 years old, but he's a man. And he has taken on so much responsibility in this company, and he is making us soar. Or, writing to the parents of a young woman to say, these are the actions that she has taken that has put us in much better financial situation. Or the fact that the customers rave about her. And see the pride of the parents and the spouses.
Right.
And having their loved one work with us. And that was the, cost of a stamp and, a few minutes to write a note, and saw it have a big impact.
Right. And that comes back to what you were saying at the very start. And that's that you have to have listened to them, and so, that, okay, maybe those parents really sacrificed to send them to school, or, to make sure that they got that training, or, whatever it was. And, or as you said, that the spouse is having to deal with the fact that they've got 4 kids and you've got their other partner on the road half the time, things like that. But yeah, because you listened, you knew, or, maybe not you, maybe somebody else in the company, but somebody heard what was going on and then passed that information on.
I made it a practice to, anytime we had a company event, like in a summer party, or to bring their extended families. So that's where I got to meet the parents and the grandparents and the kids. And so I didn't have to go to ask anybody else, how do I get to this person, or what sacrifices they're making. I knew. I was talking to them. And often at Lucy had lunch with them.
I love it.
I knew the family members well. And I think that was a critical part of making the employee feel appreciated and wanted.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, we only have a couple minutes left. So tell people how they find you and connect with you online.
Great. Well, I'm Sherry Stewart D on Instagram and Twitter. And my book is Lunch with Lucy, Maximize Profits by Investing in Your People. You can get it at Amazon or at Target or at every airport in the U.S.
When we go back to them.
Yeah, we go back to them. And Brain Trust is at ourbraintrust.org. If a woman or somebody who loves a woman business owner wants to tell them about Brain Trust and how to get to that $1 million point.
I love it. I love it. Well, I about just called you Lucy. Sherry and Lucy, this has been absolutely fabulous. And I love having these discussions because, whether we have employees or not, many people who listen to this program are small business owners. At some point, they might have employees. They've got family members. I mean, shoot, all of these practices apply to your family members also. We might be the head of a volunteer organization, all those things. Everything that we've been saying applies to them. And so that's why I think this is so important. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, what you just said about how no matter where we are, empathy can be impactful. The ability to put yourself in the shoes of the people you're dealing with, or to see the world through their eyes, through their lens, just exercising that quality will help you be more impactful and more significant, and will definitely make the world a better place.
I love it. And what a great way to end. I'm Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely wonderful discussion with Sherry Deutschmann. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Deb.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.